A failure is a part of life, but Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that for a moment. What if failure wasn't something to fear or avoid, but a tool, a stepping stone toward inner growth and resilience? Every one of us has faced moments where things didn't go as planned, where setbacks felt overwhelming. Yet, what if those very moments held the key to becoming stronger, wiser, and more in control of our own lives? In this video, we're diving deep into the Stoic approach to failure, how ancient wisdom teaches us to embrace setbacks, detach from outcomes, and transform losses into powerful lessons. Along the way, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in Stoic philosophy to help you not just survive failure but harness it for growth. So, let's uncover how embracing failure can reshape the way you see yourself and the world around you. Failure is as natural to life as breathing. The Stoics believed that to live is to encounter setbacks, mistakes, and shortcomings. It's an inseparable part of the human experience. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor often called a philosopher king, understood this deeply. Despite being one of the most powerful men of his time, his life was filled with challenges, wars, plagues, betrayal, and the enormous weight of ruling an empire. Yet, he wrote, "You have to assemble your life action by action, and be satisfied if each one achieves its goal as far as possible." Marcus reminded himself again and again that perfection is not the goal because life is messy and unpredictable. The Stoics saw failure not as something to fear or avoid, but as something inevitable and even beneficial. They believed that failure often stems from forces outside our control, whether external circumstances, the actions of others, or even simply the randomness of life. Epictetus, a former slave turned Stoic philosopher, captured this idea perfectly when he said, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This wisdom reminds us that while we can strive to do our best, the results are not always up to us. Let's pause on that for a moment. How often do we tie our sense of self-worth to an outcome we can't completely control? Maybe it's that job you didn't get or the relationship that didn't work out. It's easy to feel consumed by shame or self-blame in these moments, as if we've fallen short. But the Stoics challenge us to see failure differently. Instead of condemning ourselves or fixating on the outcome, they invite us to reflect on the process. Did we act with integrity? Did we put in effort aligned with our values? If the answer is yes, then we've already succeeded, regardless of the external result. Failure, according to the Stoics, is also one of our greatest teachers. When things don't go as planned, it's a unique opportunity to examine our actions, decisions, or assumptions. It's a chance to grow in self-awareness and wisdom. Think of it like touching a hot stove as a child. Yes, it's painful, but it's also how we learn not to repeat the same mistake. For the Stoics, failure is more than an obstacle, it's feedback, a guide pointing us toward improvement. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal writings, took this idea to heart. He often reflected on his own shortcomings, his human tendencies toward anger, impatience, or pride, and used them as opportunities to cultivate humility and strength. He didn't view these moments as a reason to give up or wallow in guilt, but as reminders of his humanity. He believed that failing with grace and learning from it is far more valuable than striving for an impossible ideal of flawlessness. So, here's a question to consider. What would change in your life if you no longer saw failure as a source of shame, but as a natural and necessary part of growth? If you could accept that setbacks are not personal flaws but simply part of the human journey, by focusing on what is within your power, how you respond, how you learn, and how you move forward, you can transform failure into a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. This, the Stoics would say, is where true strength lies. When you face a setback, how do you interpret it? Do you see it as proof that you're not good enough, that you've made an irreversible mistake? Or could it be something more, a signal, a moment to pause and learn? For the Stoics, failure was never the end of the road. Instead, it was feedback, a teacher pointing to what could be improved, refined, or strengthened within ourselves. This mindset shift, seeing failure as feedback, is at the heart of Stoic philosophy. Seneca, one of the most famous Stoic thinkers, wrote extensively about the importance of self-reflection in navigating life's challenges. He once said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." This idea of life as a continuous process of learning is crucial to reframing failure. When something doesn't go as planned, the Stoics encourage us not to dwell on feelings of shame or frustration, but to step back and ask, what can this failure teach me? Through this lens, failure is no longer a personal flaw or something to hide from, but an opportunity to examine your choices, actions, and assumptions. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you've worked hard on a project at your job, investing time, energy, and creativity, only to have it fall flat. Maybe your boss wasn't impressed, or the results didn't match your expectations. In that moment, it's easy to spiral into self-doubt or frustration, asking yourself questions like, "What's wrong with me?" But the Stoics would challenge you to ask a different set of questions. What factors contributed to this result? Was there something I could have done differently? What lessons can I carry forward into my next project? This doesn't mean beating yourself up or scrutinizing every detail in search of perfection. Instead, it's about approaching the situation with curiosity rather than condemnation, treating failure as a mirror that reflects what's working and what isn't. Seneca believed that setbacks are some of our greatest opportunities for growth because they force us to confront realities we might otherwise overlook. Perhaps you identified a skill you need to improve, or maybe you realized you weren't effectively communicating your ideas to others. These are lessons you might never have learned without the so-called failure. Stoic philosophy also reminds us that failure itself is not inherently negative, it only has the meaning we assign to it. Think of an athlete who loses an important game. For one person, this might feel like utter defeat, but for another, it's the fuel they need to train harder and come back stronger. The Stoics would say the difference lies in interpretation. By reframing failure as feedback, the second athlete is able to use the experience for improvement, while the first may become stuck in a cycle of self-pity. This practice applies to every area of life, from careers and relationships to personal goals. The next time you stumble, ask yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me? Where might I need to adjust my actions, thinking, or approach? Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." In other words, just as physical exercise challenges your muscles to make them stronger, setbacks challenge your mind and character to help you grow. So the question becomes, how can you turn your next failure into a step forward? By adopting the Stoic perspective, you can transform any setback into a tool for self-improvement. Failure isn't your enemy, it's your greatest teacher if you're willing to listen. Imagine this, you've spent years working toward a promotion at your job. You've put in the hours, exceeded expectations, and felt certain that this next step was yours. But then it doesn't happen. The promotion goes to someone else. At first, it feels devastating, like all your hard work has been for nothing, and your future has taken an irreversible hit. But what if, instead of seeing this as the end of something, you reframed it as the start of something new? What if losing this opportunity created space for an even better one? Maybe it gave you the push to explore a different role, develop new skills, or even start your own business. These shifts in perspective are exactly what the Stoics emphasized as the key to navigating failure. For the Stoics, perspective is everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." At its core, this means that while we can't control what happens to us, we can always control how we interpret it. This is where the Stoic power of perspective comes in. Failure itself is neutral. It's neither good nor bad until we assign it meaning. And the meaning we choose to give it can shape how we move forward. Let's draw on an ancient example. Imagine a shipwreck. To one person, it may seem like an irredeemable tragedy, the moment their plans are torn apart by forces beyond their control. But to another, that same event might be seen as an invitation to rebuild, to find a new path, or to develop resilience in the face of adversity. The circumstances are identical, but the outcomes are vastly different, all because of the perspectives involved. Marcus Aurelius himself practiced this principle continually. As a Roman emperor, he faced countless crises, from wars to plagues to political betrayals. Yet, his meditations consistently reflect a calm acceptance of what happened, paired with a deliberate effort to reframe these events. When faced with challenges, Marcus would remind himself that external events are just that, external. They only harm us if we let them. Instead, he saw every setback as a chance to practice virtues like patience, wisdom, and courage. In essence, he turned failures into opportunities for personal growth simply by shifting his perspective. Now let's bring this idea into modern times with a relatable example. Consider Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, who was famously fired from the very company he helped create. At the time, this could have been interpreted as a catastrophic failure. And yet, Jobs later described it as the best thing that ever happened to him. Why? Because it freed him to explore new ideas, eventually leading to the creation of groundbreaking companies like Pixar and his triumphant return to Apple. His perspective transformed his failure into a launching pad for success. Without that setback, his greatest achievements might never have happened. So how can we, like Marcus Aurelius or Steve Jobs, use perspective to navigate our own failures? Start by asking yourself, is this event truly as catastrophic as it seems, or is it simply uncomfortable because it's unexpected? What opportunities could this failure uncover that I might have overlooked? And most importantly, how can I use reason to reframe the situation in a way that empowers me to move forward? The Stoics believed that by stepping back and applying our rational mind, we can transform even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth. The next time you encounter a failure, take a moment to reframe it. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" try asking, "What can I learn from this? How can this make me better?" Shifting your perspective won't change the event itself, but it will change your relationship to it, and in that choice lies incredible power. Failure, reframed through the Stoic lens, becomes not an end but a beginning, a chance to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. One of the cornerstones of Stoic philosophy is the concept known as the Dichotomy of Control. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, summed it up perfectly when he said, "Some things are up to us and some things are not." This deceptively simple idea contains profound wisdom that, when applied, can completely transform how we approach failure, rejection, and even the uncontrollable chaos of life. At its core, the dichotomy of control teaches us to focus our energy and attention solely on what we can influence, while learning to let go of what we cannot. Think of life as having two distinct categories, one that falls under your control and another that doesn't. What's in your control? Your actions, your choices, your thoughts, and how you respond to events. And what's outside your control? pretty much everything else: other people's opinions, the economy, unexpected circumstances, and even the outcome of your efforts. By recognizing this divide, the Stoics believed we could free ourselves from unnecessary stress and get clarity on where to channel our energy. Let's put this into perspective with a practical example. Imagine you've just lost your job. This, no doubt, feels devastating, like you've been stripped of stability, security, and a sense of purpose. But if we apply the dichotomy of control, we see that elements of this situation are outside of your power. You can't control the company's financial decisions or the actions of your employer. However, you can control how you react to the loss. Do you spend valuable time and energy lamenting the situation, replaying it over and over in your mind, or blaming external factors? Or do you take a step back, accept the reality of what's happened, and focus on your next move, updating your resume, reaching out to contacts, or perhaps even using this time to explore a new career path? The Stoics would urge you to accept what's uncontrollable with grace and redirect your efforts to what you can change. This isn't about being passive or emotionless. Instead, it's about choosing to focus your emotional and mental energy on productive actions rather than wasting it on resistance or frustration. Epictetus often reminded his followers, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When faced with rejection, failure, or unexpected change, this principle becomes your guide, a reminder to shift your perspective from helplessness to empowerment. Here's another way to think about it. Picture yourself in the middle of a storm at sea. The winds are howling and the waves are battering your boat. You can panic, shout at the sky, and curse the storm all you want, but none of that will calm the waves. The storm is outside your control. However, what is within your control is how you steer your boat. Do you grip the wheel tightly, adjust your sails, and navigate the best course possible? Or do you let go and surrender to the chaos? The dichotomy of control teaches you to focus on steering your own ship, no matter how turbulent the external conditions may be. This mindset isn't just theoretical, it's deeply practical. In fact, modern psychology has validated the benefits of focusing on controllable actions, showing that those who adopt this approach experience less anxiety, greater resilience, and an overall sense of empowerment. Even in situations where the outcome remains uncertain, the Stoic approach ensures that you're doing all that's within your power to handle it well. So, the next time you face a moment of failure, disappointment, or something outside your influence, pause and ask yourself, what part of this is within my control? Then pour your energy into that, accept the rest and let it go. Because as the Stoics knew, peace of mind doesn't come from controlling the uncontrollable, it comes from mastering yourself. And that, more than anything, is what allows us to navigate failure and uncertainty with resilience and purpose. Seneca once said, "Fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men." This powerful quote captures the essence of how the Stoics viewed failure, not as a source of embarrassment or despair, but as a necessary crucible for growth. Just as gold is tested and purified in fire, adversity reveals and strengthens our character. In fact, the Stoics believed that failure is one of life's greatest training grounds for virtue, offering us an opportunity to embody traits like patience, resilience, and courage. It's through setbacks that we learn what we are truly capable of and develop the tools to navigate future challenges with grace and wisdom. Let's break this down. When we experience failure, our first instinct might be to avoid the discomfort, to distract ourselves, blame external circumstances, or retreat into self-pity. But the Stoics urge us to take a different approach. They saw adversity as a chance to practice and hone the very qualities that make us strong. Let's start with patience. When things don't go our way, it's an invitation to slow down, take a breath, and endure the moment without letting frustration take over. Imagine you're stuck in traffic on the way to an important meeting, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to change the situation. While it's tempting to get worked up, only patience allows you to channel that energy constructively, to accept what's happening, respond calmly, and prepare yourself for whatever comes next. Then there's resilience. Failure teaches us that life won't always follow our expectations, and that's okay. It's not about avoiding setbacks, but responding to them in a way that strengthens us. Think of resilience like a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it becomes. Each failure is another repetition, training you to bounce back more quickly and adapt to whatever life throws your way. Take Thomas Edison as an example. When his early prototypes for the light bulb failed over and over again, he didn't see those attempts as defeats. Instead, he famously reframed them as, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That mindset embodies Stoic resilience, embracing challenges as part of the process rather than a reason to give up. And then there's courage, perhaps the most transformative virtue failure can help us cultivate. Courage isn't just about bold acts of bravery. It's about choosing to face discomfort, fear, or uncertainty head-on. It takes courage to try again after a setback, to risk failure once more in the pursuit of something meaningful. Let's say you've poured your heart into starting a small business only to see it falter. In that moment, giving up might feel like the easiest option. But courage asks you to rise above the fear of failure and take the lessons you've learned to move forward. Whether that means refining your business model, pursuing a new venture, or simply trusting yourself to make the next right choice. Now, here's why this matters so deeply. The Stoics believed that the true measure of a person isn't how they behave when everything is going smoothly. It's how they act when the pressure is on, when the unexpected happens, when the stakes feel high. Failure strips away our pretenses and forces us to confront our true selves. Are we reactionary, blaming others and giving up? Or are we deliberate, reflective, and willing to transform our challenges into opportunities for growth? Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius all remind us that virtues like patience, resilience, and courage are not innate traits. They are skills practices that require effort and intention to develop. And failure is one of the best environments to cultivate them. So the next time you face a setback, think of it as a test instead of asking, "Why me?" Ask, "What does this moment demand of me? How can I use this as a chance to grow?" This shift in perspective transforms failure from a source of frustration into a training ground for becoming the best version of yourself. And that, the Stoics would argue, is the real purpose of adversity. Picture this: you've just poured months of effort into an important project, only to see it fall apart at the last minute. Maybe it was your dream job interview that didn't go as planned, or a personal goal that slipped out of reach. What's your initial reaction? For many of us, failure brings a tidal wave of emotions: anger, frustration, despair, or even shame. These feelings can be overwhelming, sometimes leaving us stuck in a loop of self-doubt or regret. The Stoics, however, approached emotions in a unique and profoundly practical way. They didn't deny or suppress them. Instead, they sought to understand and manage them, ensuring emotions served as signals rather than dictators of their actions. According to the Stoics, emotions themselves aren't the problem. It's the response to them that can either help or harm us. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reminded himself, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." What he's suggesting here is that while emotions like frustration or disappointment might naturally arise, we have the power to decide what happens next. Do we allow those emotions to spiral into destructive states like despair or anger? Or do we take a step back, reflect, and respond thoughtfully? For the Stoics, this ability to pause and respond rationally rather than reacting impulsively is one of the greatest skills a person can develop. Let's take a closer look at anger, one of the most common emotional reactions to failure. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who wrote extensively on the nature of emotions, described anger as a brief madness, an emotion that clouds our judgment and often leads to regrettable actions. For example, imagine a business deal falls through because of a partner's mistake. Anger might tempt you to lash out or burn bridges, but will that response fix the situation? Rarely. Instead, it often worsens the outcome and damages relationships. The Stoics advised recognizing anger as it arises, naming it, and then asking whether it serves a useful purpose. More often than not, the answer is no. By bringing awareness to the emotion, you prevent it from dictating your actions. Now, despair, the feeling of hopelessness often triggered by failure, can be just as dangerous. It can paralyze us, convincing us that there's no way forward. Marcus Aurelius had an antidote for this, focusing on the present moment. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." You can handle just that, and if you succeed in doing so, you will live the life that is yours. When despair creeps in, it's often because we're fixated on the past we cannot change or a future we can't control. By grounding yourself in the present, what you can do right now, you reclaim your sense of agency and take the first small step toward progress. So, how can we apply Stoic wisdom to manage emotions during moments of failure? Here's a practical tip. When emotions start to swell, pause and label what you're feeling. Instead of thinking, "I've failed," reframe it as, "I'm feeling anger because this didn't work out," or "I'm feeling disappointed because my expectations weren't met." Simply naming the emotion creates space between you and the feeling, giving your rational mind a chance to step in. From there, ask yourself, what's within my control right now? What's the next small step I can take to move forward? This shift helps you avoid being consumed by emotion and refocuses your energy on what you can influence. Ultimately, the Stoics didn't believe in becoming emotionless. They knew that emotions are a natural and unavoidable part of life, but they also understood the importance of mastering those emotions, ensuring they guide us rather than control us. By recognizing emotions as signals and responding with rationality, we can navigate failure with clarity and purpose. The next time you feel anger or despair creeping in, remember Marcus Aurelius's reminder: you don't have to turn this into something. Instead, pause, reflect, and choose a response rooted in wisdom. The Stoics understood that true growth rarely comes from comfort. In fact, they believed that avoiding discomfort often leads to a weaker mind and spirit, making us less equipped to handle life's inevitable challenges. Instead of running from discomfort, they leaned into it, deliberately seeking it out as a way to build resilience and strengthen their character. This approach extended to every area of life, including how they viewed failure. For the Stoics, failure wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a unique and valuable form of discomfort, one that could be harnessed to toughen the mind and prepare for future adversity. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most notable figures, had a fascinating practice that embodies this idea. Despite his immense wealth as a Roman statesman, Seneca would often lie for days or even weeks as though he were poor. He dressed in simple, rough clothing, ate the most basic of meals, and slept on the floor. Why would someone with access to luxury voluntarily endure such discomfort? Seneca explained that this practice was not about punishment but preparation. By experiencing hardship voluntarily, he reminded himself that the fear of losing wealth or status was often far worse than the reality itself. He would ask himself during these exercises, "Is this what I feared?" The answer was almost always no, as he realized he could endure much more than he initially thought. Then there's Epictetus, who faced profound discomfort throughout his life, not by choice but by circumstance. Born into slavery and later physically disabled by his master, Epictetus could have been consumed by bitterness or despair. Instead, he used his hardships as the ultimate Stoic training ground. He taught that external discomfort, no matter how severe, could be overcome through the strength of one's inner character. For Epictetus, failure and suffering were not curses but opportunities to practice virtues like endurance, patience, and acceptance. His life serves as a powerful example of how embracing discomfort, whether chosen or imposed, can shape an unyielding spirit. So how does this ancient wisdom apply to our modern lives? While most of us won't be wearing scratchy tunics or sleeping on the floor anytime soon, we can still seek out productive discomfort in everyday ways. For example, you might deliberately take on a challenging project at work, even if there's a risk of falling short. Or perhaps you could start conversations with people who have different viewpoints, even though it feels uncomfortable. These small acts of stepping outside your comfort zone strengthen your mental fortitude, making you less likely to crumble in the face of larger setbacks. Each experience trains your mind to see failure not as an insurmountable obstacle but as a manageable and even useful part of life. Physical discomfort is another area where we can grow. For instance, exercising when you don't feel like it or taking a cold shower are small but effective practices of embracing discomfort. These acts remind us that we are capable of enduring unpleasant moments and coming out stronger on the other side. Over time, this builds a mental resilience that carries over into other challenges, including emotional or professional setbacks. Each time you willingly face discomfort, you're training yourself to stay calm and composed when life throws unexpected failures your way. The Stoics also had a practice called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This involved imagining worst-case scenarios, not to dwell in fear but to mentally prepare for them. For example, if you're worried about failing at a new business venture, take a moment to vividly picture what that failure might look like. Imagine losing money, feeling embarrassed, or needing to start over. Then ask yourself, could I handle this? What would I do next? Just like Seneca's voluntary poverty, this exercise helps demystify failure, showing you that while it may be uncomfortable, it's rarely as catastrophic as your fears make it out to be. The takeaway is simple but profound. By seeking out controlled discomfort in small, manageable ways, you're building a stronger, more resilient mind. Failure, when reframed as a form of productive discomfort, becomes less intimidating and more valuable. The next time you face a setback, instead of avoiding the discomfort, try leaning into it. Use it as a chance to practice resilience just as the Stoics did. Because in the end, it's through embracing discomfort and failure that we grow into the strongest version of ourselves. Think of waves crashing against a shoreline. Each one tumbles forward with force, leaving a mark on the sand, only to retreat seconds later, replaced by the next. No single wave remains. The marks they leave are temporary, quickly smoothed away by the tides. Failure, the Stoics would say, is much like those waves. It may arrive with intensity, overwhelm us in the moment, and leave its impression on our lives, but it's never permanent. Like the waves, it too inevitably fades, giving way to new opportunities, new experiences, and new chances to move forward. This understanding lies at the heart of the Stoic view of impermanence. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the fleeting nature of all things. In his Meditations, he wrote, "Time is like a river, a violent current of events, glimpsed once and already carried past us, and another follows and is gone." What Marcus is reminding us of here is that every experience, whether it's a moment of joy, a success, or a failure, is temporary. The pain of a setback, no matter how sharp or overwhelming, is not a permanent fixture in your life. Like a wave, it passes. When we forget this truth, failure can feel all-consuming, as though it defines us or dictates our future in an unchangeable way. But consider this: how many failures, disappointments, or struggles from years ago still weigh heavily on your mind today? Chances are, many of those moments that once seemed insurmountable have faded into the background, absorbed by the passage of time. Perhaps they even led to outcomes you couldn't have predicted, new paths, new opportunities, or even personal growth that you might not have experienced otherwise. The Stoics encourage us to keep this broader perspective in mind. They teach us that no failure, no matter how painful, lasts forever. Let's take a practical example. Imagine someone loses a job they were deeply invested in. In the immediate aftermath, it may feel like the end of the world. They might worry about their finances, their reputation, or their ability to find a similar role. But fast forward a year, and that same person might find themselves in a new, better job, or even pursuing a path they never would have considered otherwise, like starting their own business or developing a new skill. The key here is time. What felt like a devastating failure in the moment transforms into just another event in the timeline of their life, something that eventually passed and made room for something new. The Stoics believed that keeping the impermanence of failure at the forefront of our minds helps us maintain a sense of perspective during difficult times. Marcus Aurelius recommended stepping back and viewing your life as though from a great height, seeing how small any single moment, good or bad, is in the vast context of your existence. This practice helps diminish the emotional weight of failure. Instead of seeing it as an immovable obstacle, you begin to view it as a passing moment, a ripple in the larger current of your life. Adopting this mindset doesn't mean ignoring failure or pretending it doesn't hurt. The Stoics weren't about avoidance. They acknowledged the sting of setbacks, but paired that acknowledgement with a deeper understanding. Failure is not the final chapter unless you allow it to be. It is simply one scene in the story, one moment in the ever-flowing stream of time. So, the next time you experience failure, imagine it as a wave. Feel its force, let it wash over you, but also remember that it will recede. Time will move forward, and you with it. The impermanence of failure reminds us that even our hardest moments are temporary. What matters most is how we choose to respond to them, to let them define us or to let them shape us into something stronger for the future. Imagine this scenario. You've been preparing for months for an important promotion at work. You've put in countless hours, stayed late, delivered results, and even sacrificed time with family and friends, all for this opportunity. But when the decision is made, the promotion goes to someone else. In that moment, disappointment hits hard, and a wave of questions floods your mind. Did I not work hard enough? What's wrong with me? What could I have done differently? It's tempting to see this as a personal failure, to conflate external circumstances with your own sense of self-worth. But the Stoics would encourage you to pause and ask yourself, is this truly my failure, or is it an external event beyond my control? The Stoics made an important distinction between external and internal failures. External failures are related to outcomes or circumstances that exist outside of us, things like losing a job, being rejected, or facing setbacks caused by forces beyond our influence. Internal failures, on the other hand, are entirely within our control. They involve our character, our choices, and whether we live in alignment with our values. To the Stoics, what truly mattered wasn't what happened to you, but how you conducted yourself in response. Epictetus put it simply, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Let's go back to the example of losing the promotion. The external failure in this case is not getting the job. That's clear, but here's the key. The Stoics would argue that this alone doesn't define you. Not receiving the promotion is the result of external circumstances. Perhaps another candidate had different qualifications, or the decision came down to company politics. These factors are outside your control. where the Stoics would encourage you to focus is on your internal response. Did you maintain your integrity throughout the process? Did you approach the work with discipline, commitment, and fairness? Did you act virtuously, even in disappointment? If so, then by Stoic standards, you haven't failed at all. You've succeeded in the most important sense by staying true to your principles. Now, let's consider internal failures, which the Stoics viewed as far more significant than any external setback. Internal failures occur when we fail to act in accordance with our own values or lose control over our emotions and actions. For instance, if in response to losing the promotion, you lash out in anger, undermine the person who received the job, or indulge in self-pity, then this is an internal failure. It's a failure not because of the external event, but because you've allowed yourself to stray from the path of virtue, abandoning qualities like patience, humility, and self-control. For the Stoics, this is the only type of failure that truly warrants concern. Epictetus emphasized this when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." To the Stoics, internal failures are deeply significant because they are the only kind we have complete control over. External failures may come and go, but the state of your character is entirely within your hands. This distinction is empowering. It reminds us that no matter what happens in the world around us, we always have the ability to choose how we act and who we become. The next time you face what feels like failure, ask yourself, is this an external event or an internal one? If it's external, remember that your worth isn't defined by circumstances outside your control. Instead, focus on what's within your power, your actions, your mindset, and your ability to act virtuously. If it's an internal failure, see it as a valuable wake-up call. Reflect on where you fell short of your values and use the experience as an opportunity to grow. By placing greater weight on internal successes rather than external outcomes, the Stoics teach us to live with greater clarity, resilience, and purpose. Because in the end, the only true failure is failing to live in alignment with the person you strive to be. Seneca once said, "You must live for another if you wish to live for yourself." While this might seem like advice on selflessness, it has a deeper layer of wisdom. The necessity of treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would extend to others. When we talk about Stoicism, there's often a misconception that it's about hardening yourself against the world, suppressing emotions, or stoically enduring suffering without complaint. But in truth, Stoicism is just as much about cultivating inner compassion as it is about strengthening resilience. The Stoics believed that being kind to yourself, especially in the face of failure, is a vital part of personal growth and living a balanced, virtuous life. Let's begin by addressing why this matters. When we fail, it's natural to feel a sense of guilt, frustration, or disappointment. These emotions can quickly spiral into harsh self-criticism with thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," or "Why do I always mess things up?" Creeping in, the Stoics understood that this kind of inner dialogue doesn't help. It only drags us further from the clarity and calm we need to move forward. Seneca reminded us of this when he advised, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which depends on the morrow and wastes the day." In other words, dwelling on the unrealized what-ifs of failure only blinds us to the opportunity for growth that lies in the present moment. Self-compassion in Stoicism invites us to take those thoughts and gently reframe them. Instead of harsh criticism, we practice forgiveness and constructive self-reflection. Consider this: if a close friend came to you after experiencing a failure, would you berate them for their mistakes? Would you highlight everything they did wrong? Likely not. Instead, you'd offer them support, encouragement, and a reminder that one setback doesn't define their worth. Self-compassion asks us to give ourselves that same grace, the understanding that everyone falls short sometimes, and that failure is a powerful teacher rather than a permanent verdict on our abilities. But what does this look like in practice? It starts with catching negative self-talk when it arises. The next time you notice yourself thinking something like, "I'm terrible at this," or "I'll never succeed," pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this how I would speak to someone I care about? If the answer is no, take a step back and reframe the thought. For example, "I'll never succeed" can become, "This didn't work out the way I hoped, but I learned something valuable for next time." By shifting the focus from blame to learning, you create space for growth and forward momentum. Another powerful practice is what I like to call the compassionate audit. After a failure or setback, take a moment to sit with yourself and reflect, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity. Ask, what went well despite the outcome? What can I improve moving forward? What do I need to forgive myself for in order to move on? This exercise helps you approach the situation with balance, acknowledging both your efforts and the lessons to be learned. It's not about ignoring mistakes, but about engaging with them in a way that builds confidence rather than tears you down. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting yourself off the hook entirely or ignoring areas where you can grow. The Stoics valued accountability, but they paired it with an understanding that growth takes time and patience. They were firm believers in progress over perfection. Marcus Aurelius often wrote reminders to himself about his own shortcomings, but he didn't do so with anger or self-loathing. Instead, he used those moments as opportunities to refocus on his values and improve. He even referred to his own failings as small matters, emphasizing that missteps, while important to learn from, are not worth carrying as a burden. By practicing self-compassion, you align with the Stoic ideal of working toward self-improvement without becoming paralyzed by self-doubt. It's a gentle but powerful way to transform failure into growth. The next time you stumble, remember that the path forward isn't paved with harshness, but with understanding. Failure is inevitable, but how you treat yourself in its wake can make all the difference. As the Stoics taught us, forgive yourself, learn, and grow. That's the foundation of a truly resilient and virtuous life. When failure strikes, it's easy to feel paralyzed, stuck in a loop of overanalyzing what went wrong or waiting for the perfect moment to try again. But if the Stoics taught us one thing, it's this: the worst thing you can do after failure is nothing. Marcus Aurelius gave us a timeless piece of advice in his Meditations: do what is in front of you. No matter how overwhelming a failure might feel, the Stoics believed the path forward begins with a single step, taking immediate, purposeful action to regain momentum, even if that action feels small or insignificant at first. Let's start with an example. Imagine you've just faced a significant setback, like launching a business idea that didn't pan out. After the disappointment, it's tempting to get lost in your thoughts, wondering where it all went wrong, replaying your decisions, or waiting for the right time to try again. But this period of indecision can quickly turn into inaction, and the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to move forward. The Stoics would suggest a different approach. First, pause and reflect, not to dwell on the failure, but to gain clarity. What did you learn from the experience? What changes could you make? Once you've taken a moment to gather your thoughts, the next question becomes, what's the smallest, most immediate action you can take to start moving forward again? Marcus Aurelius's advice to do what is in front of you is a call to focus on what you can do right now, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the full scope of the challenge ahead. After failure, clarity often comes from action, not the other way around. For example, if your business idea didn't succeed, the next step might be as simple as jotting down lessons learned, brainstorming new strategies, or reaching out to a mentor for advice. These actions might feel small, but they're powerful. The Stoics understood that progress is built through consistency, not grand gestures. One step leads to another, and before you know it, you're back on track. This approach is especially valuable when failure feels overwhelming. Often, we fall into the trap of thinking we need to have all the answers or make huge, dramatic changes to recover from a setback. But the Stoics remind us to narrow our focus. Epictetus, for example, taught that we should concentrate on what's within our power, letting go of what isn't. Rather than trying to fix everything at once, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today to make progress? That's all. Action doesn't need to be complicated, it just needs to be consistent. Let's consider a practical example. Say you've set a goal to improve your fitness but missed a week of workouts. Instead of dwelling on the missed days or trying to make up for lost time, the Stoic approach would be to focus on what's in front of you. Can you do a short workout today? Can you plan a healthier meal for dinner? These small actions might not feel revolutionary in the moment, but they're how momentum is rebuilt step by step. Another key Stoic principle is the idea of focusing on the present moment. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to stay grounded in the here and now, writing, "Never let the future disturb you." You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which arm you against the present. Applied to failure, this means avoiding the trap of obsessing over what might happen next. Analyzing the future has its place, but action happens in the present. Even if you're not sure of the perfect solution, doing anything creates movement. And movement, however small, is what pulls us out of the inertia failure can create. The Stoics weren't about perfection or waiting for ideal circumstances. They believed in progress, in taking meaningful steps forward, even when the road seems unclear. Failure is not the opposite of action. It's the perfect reason for action. Reflect, regroup, and then, as Marcus Aurelius would say, do what is in front of you. That's how you turn failure into your greatest momentum. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, left behind a remarkable body of work known as Meditations. What makes these writings so extraordinary isn't just the wisdom they contain, it's the fact that they were never intended for public consumption. These were his private thoughts, his way of reflecting on his challenges, his failures, and his humanity. Through journaling, Marcus Aurelius processed the chaos of ruling a vast empire, the betrayals of close allies, and even his own personal shortcomings. His meditations were a tool for self-reflection, a way for him to realign his actions with his beliefs and extract valuable lessons from his experiences. And while most of us aren't emperors managing empires, the principle remains the same. Reflection, particularly through journaling, is an essential Stoic practice for growth. It takes the raw material of failure and transforms it into wisdom. By putting thoughts onto paper, or even into a digital format, you externalize the emotions and complexity of failure, creating clarity and detachment. Journaling allows you to examine what happened, why it happened, and most importantly, how you can move forward in a way that's aligned with your values. So how can you apply this practice in your own life? Let's break it down. Journaling doesn't need to be an elaborate ritual. In fact, some of the most powerful reflections happen through simple, consistent habits. After a failure, or even at the end of a challenging day, take a few moments to ask yourself thoughtful questions like, what went wrong? What part of this was within my control? What can I learn from this experience to make better choices in the future? These prompts aren't meant to beat yourself up over mistakes, but to get curious about what the situation can teach you. For example, if a project at work didn't meet expectations, your journal entry might look something like this. Why didn't this go as planned? Did I communicate effectively with my team? Was I clear on my priorities, or did I try to handle too much at once? Moving forward, how can I ensure better communication and proper time management? This process isn't about assigning blame. It's about uncovering insights that can help you improve while keeping the focus squarely on what is within your power to change. Another useful journaling technique is what I like to call reframing the narrative. When a failure feels overwhelming, write down the story you're telling yourself about it, your fears, your frustrations, your self-criticisms. Then challenge that story. Ask yourself, is this really true? Am I focusing too much on the negatives while ignoring what I did well? How can I rewrite this narrative with a focus on growth rather than defeat? By practicing this reframing, you'll find that failure often loses its sting, becoming less of a roadblock and more of a stepping stone. Journaling also has a way of revealing patterns over time. When you look back at previous entries, you may start to notice recurring themes, certain habits or behaviors that hold you back. Maybe you'll see that procrastination keeps popping up as an obstacle, or that fear of criticism has stopped you from taking risks. These patterns give you a roadmap for self-improvement, showing you exactly where to focus your efforts. Now, here's a question to consider. When was the last time you really paused to reflect on a failure? Not to dwell on it, but to deeply explore what it taught you. If you haven't tried journaling as a way to process setbacks, this could be your invitation to start. Take just 5 minutes at the end of the day to jot down your thoughts. You might be surprised by how much clarity and perspective you gain. Through reflection and journaling, you can turn failure into a powerful tool for self-discovery and growth. Like Marcus Aurelius, your writing doesn't need to be perfect or profound. What matters most is the act of engaging with your thoughts, learning from your experiences, and moving forward with intention. After all, the path to resilience is paved with moments of reflection, one insight at a time. Failure has a way of testing us like nothing else can. Take the story of Thomas Edison. Before inventing the light bulb, Edison famously failed thousands of times trying to find the right filament. When asked about his repeated failures, he didn't see it as failure at all. He reportedly said, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This perspective didn't just lead to his ultimate success, it also built his resilience. Each failed attempt wasn't the end. It was simply a step toward something greater. And this mindset, this ability to rise again and again after setbacks, is exactly what the Stoics championed as the key to living well. To the Stoics, failure wasn't just an inconvenience or a blow to the ego. It was an essential part of the process of becoming stronger. Epictetus, one of the most well-known Stoic philosophers, often compared life to a wrestling match. He said, "What then does it mean to be undefeated? It means never to turn your back on an enemy." In this analogy, every fall in the ring isn't something to be feared or avoided, but an opportunity. It's in the act of getting back up each time, in learning how to adjust your stance and improve your technique, that true resilience is forged. Failure, in this sense, is the training ground. Think about it, resilience doesn't come from staying comfortable or never facing adversity. It's built when we're pushed beyond our limits and learn how to endure. Imagine a sapling growing in the shelter of a greenhouse. It might look strong, its leaves vibrant and its branches intact, but once it's exposed to the wind and rain of the outside world, it crumbles. Why? Because it never developed the roots needed to withstand the storm. In the same way, resilience is developed not in the absence of difficulty, but through it. The Stoics embraced this, seeing failure as the necessary resistance that helped strengthen their mental and emotional roots. But how do we, in our everyday lives, build resilience in the face of failure? It begins with reframing how we view setbacks. Instead of seeing failure as a final verdict, we can see it as feedback, a necessary and temporary part of the journey. Let's say you've started a small business, but it doesn't take off the way you hoped. Instead of labeling the entire effort a failure, the Stoic approach would be to examine what the experience taught you. Have you gained new skills, learned more about the market, discovered what doesn't work so you can refine your approach? every fall, like in Epictetus's wrestling match, is a chance to stand back up stronger and more prepared. Another practical strategy for building resilience is intentional exposure to small challenges. The Stoics often practiced voluntary discomfort, whether it was fasting, exposing themselves to cold, or living simply for periods of time. Seneca, for instance, would live for days wearing rough clothes and eating only the bare essentials. This wasn't about punishing himself, it was about training his mind to handle discomfort so that, when larger challenges inevitably arose, he would be ready. In today's terms, this might look like setting small but difficult goals to stretch your limits or trying something new that feels intimidating. Each time you push through discomfort, you're building the mental and emotional toughness needed to handle larger failures. Finally, resilience is deeply tied to self-awareness and reflection. After each setback, take time to pause and assess what worked, what didn't, what can you try differently next time. This reflective practice helps you approach the next challenge with more clarity and preparation, while reinforcing the belief that failure is never final. So the next time life knocks you down, think of Epictetus's wrestling match. Each fall is not a defeat, it's an opportunity to rise stronger, more grounded, and more prepared for the next round. Failure is not the opposite of resilience, it's the very path to it. Picture this: you've worked tirelessly on a project, pouring your time, energy, and creativity into it. You've told yourself, and maybe even others, that this is going to be your big break, through a defining moment that sets you apart. But when the results roll in, they fall short of the expectations you'd built up. Suddenly, it's not just about the project anymore. It feels personal, like a reflection of your worth or identity. And worse, a small voice inside whispers, "What will people think of me now?" That voice. That's your ego speaking, and if left unchecked, it can turn failure into something far more painful and destructive than it ever needs to be. The Stoics understood this intimately. They taught that ego, the inflated sense of self-importance, the need to protect our image, is one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth. Ego has a way of amplifying the pain of failure because it insists on attaching our sense of value to external outcomes. Seneca, in his writings, spoke often of humility as the antidote to this trap. He argued that when we remove ego from the equation, failure loses its sting and instead becomes a valuable teacher. Why do we complain, Seneca asked, about the world's unfairness when it has diverted us from error? Let's unpack that for a moment. Ego convinces us that failure is a direct attack on who we are, a threat to the image we've constructed of ourselves. But Stoicism invites us to take a step back from that mindset. It reminds us that failure is not about you as a person. It's about the action, the strategy, or the situation. When we detach from ego, we create space to look at what went wrong with clarity and objectivity. Instead of shielding ourselves from criticism out of pride, we can ask honest questions like, what can I learn from this? What can I do better next time? However, overcoming ego is easier said than done, especially in a world that often glorifies success and punishes failure. So, how do we let go of pride and embrace humility in the face of setbacks? The Stoics offer a number of insights. First, we can remember that failure is universal. Everyone, no matter how talented or successful, stumbles at some point. Even the most accomplished individuals, whether ancient philosophers or modern innovators, have faced rejection, defeat, and disappointment. Recognizing this universality helps dismantle the illusion that your failure is exceptional or uniquely shameful. Take Marcus Aurelius, for instance. As emperor, he had every reason to let pride dictate his actions, yet he spent much of his time reminding himself of his smallness in the grand scheme of the universe. Keep in mind how fast things pass by, and are gone those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river, he wrote. This perspective helped Marcus stay grounded, understanding that neither success nor failure defines us in the long run. Ego clings to the belief that every outcome is monumental, but humility allows us to see failure for what it really is, temporary, fleeting, and rarely as significant as our pride makes it out to be. Another practical tip for overcoming ego is to invite feedback. When failure strikes, our pride often tempts us to retreat into defensiveness, guarding ourselves from criticism. But humility opens the door to growth. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, seek out constructive feedback from others. Ask what could I have done differently? What blind spots might I have missed? This doesn't mean you have to accept every piece of advice at face value, but remaining open to input helps you see failure through a lens of learning rather than shame. Finally, embracing humility means recognizing that failure doesn't reduce your worth as a person. You are not your mistakes, just as you are not your successes. Both are simply outcomes of actions and decisions, not proof of your value or lack thereof. When you let go of the need to defend your ego, you free yourself to take risks, to experiment, and to fail because you know that your identity isn't on the line. So, the next time failure threatens to bruise your pride, remember Seneca's wisdom. Approach it with humility. See it not as a judgment of your character, but as a natural part of the process of growth. Ego seeks to protect you, but humility allows you to learn, and in the Stoic way of thinking, that's where true strength lies. Failure often feels like the end of the road, a door slammed shut, a dream deferred, or a stumble that leaves us doubting our own abilities. But what if failure, instead of being the conclusion to your story, is actually preparing you for something even greater? The Stoics believed this deeply and even built practices around it. One of the most profound being premeditatio malorum or the premeditation of evils. This practice wasn't about living in fear or expecting the worst. Instead, it was about mentally rehearsing adversity so that, when challenges or failures strike, as they inevitably will, we are prepared to handle them with grace, resilience, and clarity. Let's start with an example. Consider a young entrepreneur who launches a startup, pouring their time, resources, and passion into the venture. But after a year, the startup fails, profits didn't meet expectations, and the company is forced to shut its doors. At the time, this feels like devastation. Yet, when this same entrepreneur starts a new business later, they find themselves equipped with invaluable insights. They now understand market trends, better financial planning, and most importantly, how to adapt to setbacks without losing faith in themselves. That initial failure wasn't the end, it was preparation for the challenges ahead. The lessons learned in the crucible of failure became the foundation for future success. The Stoics would suggest that this isn't just an accident of luck or hindsight. They would argue that every failure, every mistake, is an opportunity to grow stronger and prepare for the next challenge. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote extensively about preparing the mind for adversity. He urged us not to avoid thinking about life's hardships, but to deliberately reflect on them in advance so that when difficulties arise, we are ready. In one of his letters, he advised, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise." This practice of premeditatio malorum involves imagining the difficulties and failures you might face, not to dwell on negativity, but to strengthen your resolve. If you're preparing for a big presentation, for example, you might visualize what would happen if the technology failed or if someone asked a difficult question you weren't prepared for. What would you do? How would you respond? By rehearsing these scenarios in your mind, you build a kind of emotional armor. If things don't go perfectly, you won't be paralyzed by the unexpected. You've already prepared yourself to adapt and move forward. Now, let's connect this to failure. Each time you face a setback in life, it's like a real-world rehearsal for the future. When you fail, you're learning how to recover, how to think critically under pressure, and how to find new solutions. That failed relationship, it taught you what you value and what you won't compromise on in a partner. That missed opportunity, it taught you how to strategize better for the next one. Each failure is building resilience, giving you tools that you'll carry into your next challenge. Seneca also believed that preparation wasn't just about imagining specific scenarios. It was about cultivating a mindset that could endure any hardship. He wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." In other words, challenges train us. Just as a weightlifter grows stronger by repeatedly lifting heavy loads, our minds grow stronger through the repeated process of facing and overcoming adversity. Failure, then, isn't something to fear, it's a critical part of resilience training. Each setback is conditioning you to handle greater challenges with more confidence and poise. So how can you incorporate this into your own life? First, embrace the idea of premeditatio malorum *. Take a moment to reflect on the potential obstacles you might face in your current goals or ambitions. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? How might I respond? This isn't about obsessing over negativity, but about giving yourself a roadmap for resilience. Second, reframe failure. The next time you stumble, instead of asking, "Why me?" ask yourself, "What is this preparing me for?" Recognize that every setback is an opportunity to grow stronger and more equipped for the road ahead. In the end, the Stoics saw failure not as an endpoint but as preparation, a way to sharpen your mind, strengthen your spirit, and cultivate the skills you'll need to face life's inevitable storms. When you embrace failure as part of your training, you'll find yourself not just surviving adversity but thriving because of it. Epictetus once said, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will, then your life will flow well." At first glance, this might seem like giving up control or settling for less, but in truth, it's a profound invitation to live in harmony with life's unpredictable nature. Failure, like any setback, often feels like swimming against the current, resisting what's already happened, wishing it away, or letting it dominate our thoughts. But no matter how hard we resist, the reality remains unchanged. The Stoics believed that the key to freedom and clarity isn't found in resisting failure, but in accepting it fully, just as it is. When we talk about acceptance, it's important to understand what it means and what it doesn't. Acceptance isn't about pretending failure doesn't hurt or resigning yourself to a life of passivity. It doesn't mean you stop striving for your goals or ignore the lessons failure has to offer. Instead, acceptance is about breaking free from the mental anguish of resistance. It's about acknowledging that what's happened cannot be undone and choosing to focus your energy on what comes next, rather than remaining trapped in regret, frustration, or denial. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine you've missed an important opportunity, perhaps a job you've been working toward for months. It's natural to feel disappointed, maybe even to replay the scenario in your head, wondering how things might have turned out differently. But this mental resistance, this unwillingness to let go, only deepens the pain. You relive the failure over and over, wishing reality could bend to your will. Yet, no amount of wishing can change what's already happened. What acceptance offers you in that moment is freedom. By acknowledging the situation as it is without fighting it, you release yourself from that cycle of mental struggle. With a clearer mind, you can start to assess the situation rationally and take meaningful steps forward. There's a powerful example of this in nature. Picture a river flowing swiftly downstream. If you fall into the current and thrash against it, trying desperately to go the opposite direction, you'll exhaust yourself without getting anywhere. But if you stop fighting and instead flow with the water, you'll find it easier to navigate. You can adjust your course, steer toward the shore, and regain control. This is what acceptance does for us. It doesn't mean passively drifting forever. It means letting go of resistance so you can wisely choose your next move. The Stoics understood that resisting what is denying failure or wishing events had unfolded differently only leads to suffering. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on this concept, writing, "Objective judgment now at this very moment. Unselfish action now at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. That's all you need." Notice he doesn't say you need to love failure or pretend it isn't difficult. He simply advises that we accept it, because in that acceptance we can focus not on the emotional weight of what we've lost, but on what we can do with the present moment. Take a real-world example. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, faced countless rejections from publishers before finding success. Imagine if she had resisted every rejection, viewing them as definitive proof of her failure or a reason to give up. Instead, she accepted those setbacks as part of her journey and used them to refine her work. Acceptance didn't mean giving up. It meant moving forward without being weighed down by the pain of what hadn't worked. So, what can you do to practice this kind of acceptance in your own life? Start by acknowledging your emotions without judgment. Failure might bring disappointment, sadness, or frustration. Those feelings are natural. But instead of fighting them or letting them spiral, simply recognize them for what they are, temporary responses. Then shift your focus to the facts. What has happened has happened. What matters now is how you choose to respond. As Epictetus reminds us, wishing for the world to align perfectly with our expectations is an exhausting and ultimately futile pursuit. But when we accept life as it is, failures, imperfections, and all, we unburden ourselves from the constant strain of resistance. Acceptance frees us to see failure not as an enemy, but as a part of life's flow. And it's in that flow that we find the clarity to move forward with strength and purpose. Think of a massive, intricate tapestry, a piece of art so grand you can barely take it all in at once. Up close, you notice individual threads. Some are vibrant and colorful, while others are dull or frayed. Alone, a single thread might look imperfect, even insignificant. But when you step back and see the full tapestry, you realize how each thread, no matter how flawed, plays a vital role in creating the greater picture. This, in many ways, captures the Stoic idea of cosmic causality, the belief that every event, even failure, is part of a larger, interconnected plan. The Stoics saw the universe as a vast, organized system where all events, good or bad, are woven together for a purpose. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this idea often. In his Meditations he wrote, "All things are interwoven with one another. A sacred bond unites them. There is scarcely one thing foreign to another." For things have been coordinated, and they combine to form the same universe. What he's suggesting here is that our individual experiences, including our failures, are not isolated incidents. They are threads in the grand tapestry of existence, each contributing to a greater unity that we may not fully understand from our limited perspective. When failure strikes, it's easy to feel like it's a disruption in your life story, something that shouldn't have happened. But the Stoics challenge us to consider that these moments of setback might actually hold meaning within the larger context of our lives. Maybe that failed relationship taught you what you truly value in a partner. Maybe losing that job pushed you toward a new opportunity you couldn't have imagined before. Or perhaps the lessons from a missed goal are preparing you for a success that's still on the horizon. From the Stoic perspective, every event, no matter how challenging, has its place in the interconnected fabric of existence. Let's take a historical example to ground this concept. Consider the story of Steve Jobs. In the early 1980s, Jobs was famously fired from Apple, the company he co-founded. At the time, it was a devastating blow, what seemed like a complete failure for someone who had poured his heart and soul into building something extraordinary. But looking back years later, Jobs described being fired as the best thing that ever happened to him. It freed him to explore new ideas, leading to the creation of NXT and Pixar, two companies that played crucial roles in shaping his later success. When he eventually returned to Apple, Jobs was armed with new insights and experiences that fueled some of the company's most groundbreaking innovations. From the Stoic lens, what appeared to be a painful setback was actually a crucial thread in the larger tapestry of his life. Marcus Aurelius offers us another way to understand this interconnectedness. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a reminder that obstacles and failures are often the very experiences that shape us into who we are meant to become. The setbacks we face might feel like roadblocks, but in the greater scheme, they are often the paths we were meant to take all along. To truly embrace this perspective requires a degree of humility. The Stoics remind us that as individuals, our view of the tapestry is limited. We might only see a single thread and think it's flawed or unnecessary, not realizing how essential it is to the overall design. This isn't about passively resigning yourself to failure or hardship. It's about trusting that every event, no matter how difficult, contributes to the larger story in ways you may not yet understand. So, the next time you face a setback, reflect on the idea of the tapestry. Remember that what feels like failure in the moment might actually be a necessary part of the greater picture. Trust, as Marcus Aurelius did, in the unity of all events and the sacred bond that ties them together. Because in the grand design of the universe, even your struggles are part of something meaningful, something much bigger than any single moment. When failure strikes, gratitude is often the last thing on our minds. It's instinctive to feel frustration, disappointment, or even anger when things don't go the way we'd hoped. But the Stoics offered a radical perspective. Even in failure, there's room for gratitude. In fact, they believed that the challenges and setbacks we face are some of life's greatest gifts, not because they're pleasant, but because they're opportunities to grow, to learn, and to strengthen our character. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, once said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This doesn't just apply to material possessions or external successes. It's about embracing every moment, even life's difficulties, with appreciation for what they teach us. Let's break this down with a practical example. Imagine you've just failed an important exam. Maybe it's one you spent weeks or months preparing for, and the crushing sense of disappointment is hard to shake. At first, it feels like there's nothing to be grateful for in this situation. It's just a stark reminder of falling short. But if you take a step back and reframe it with a Stoic mindset, you might start to see things differently. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, what if you asked yourself, what did this experience teach me? What opportunities for growth has this failure given me? Perhaps you learned that your study methods need adjusting. Or maybe the failure highlighted a deeper passion for your subject, fueling your motivation to try again with renewed energy. These lessons may not erase the sting of failure, but they're invaluable tools for moving forward. Gratitude in the face of failure is not about ignoring the pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about finding meaning in the moment, recognizing that every challenge, no matter how difficult, has the potential to shape you into a stronger, wiser version of yourself. Think about it this way: muscles only grow stronger when they are faced with resistance. Similarly, the mind and spirit grow stronger when they are tested by adversity. Being thankful for challenges isn't about denying their difficulty. It's about appreciating the strength they build in us. Epictetus also taught that life itself, with all its ups and downs, is something to be grateful for. He famously said, "Difficulties show a person's character." In other words, the challenges we face are a mirror, reflecting back not only our weaknesses but also our capacity for resilience, creativity, and perseverance. Every time we fail, we're given the chance to rise again, to adapt, to improve, and to prove to ourselves that we are more than our setbacks. This shift in perspective, from seeing failure as a loss to viewing it as an opportunity, is what gratitude in Stoicism is all about. Now, here's an invitation for you to reflect. Think about a failure you're facing, or perhaps one you've recently experienced. Maybe it's something big, like a missed career opportunity, or something smaller, like a personal goal you fell short of achieving. Take a moment to identify one thing you can be grateful for in that experience. Did it teach you something valuable about yourself? Did it reveal a skill you need to develop, a habit you need to change, or a perspective you hadn't considered before? By finding even one small thing to appreciate in the midst of failure, you can begin to reframe that experience not as a defeat, but as a stepping stone on your journey of growth. Gratitude doesn't erase failure, but it transforms how we carry it. It shifts the narrative from "why did this happen to me" to "what can I learn from this?" The Stoics understood that the challenges of life are not burdens to be avoided, but opportunities to be embraced. And when you approach failure with gratitude, you unlock its potential to shape you into something greater. Let's face it, failure doesn't always come in the form of big, life-altering moments. Sometimes it's the little things that trip us up: spilling coffee on your shirt right before a meeting, forgetting your wallet at home when you're already late, or sending an email with a glaring typo to your boss. These small, everyday mishaps might seem trivial compared to major setbacks, but they often carry a surprising amount of emotional weight. They frustrate us, throw off our rhythm, and trigger bigger reactions than they probably deserve. The good news: these daily annoyances are the perfect training ground for practicing Stoicism, and they're actually an opportunity to develop the mental habits that will help you handle larger challenges with greater resilience. Imagine this: you're rushing out the door, juggling a coffee in one hand and your bag in the other, and just as you reach for your car keys, the coffee slips, splattering everywhere. Your immediate reaction might be irritation, grumbling about how you now have to clean up, change clothes, and deal with yet another delay. But pause for a moment. What if, instead of letting this mistake ruin your day, you treated it as a chance to practice Stoic principles? The Stoics believed that these small, inconvenient moments are where we can begin to build emotional strength and clarity. Epictetus taught that we shouldn't be disturbed by external events, but rather by the way we interpret them. In this case, the spilled coffee isn't an emergency, it's just spilled coffee. It's our reaction, labeling it as a disaster or letting it snowball into a bad mood, that creates unnecessary suffering. A practical Stoic response might look like this. First, take a deep breath. Then remind yourself, this is outside my control, but what's within my control is how I respond. Instead of grumbling or rushing through the cleanup angrily, you approach the situation calmly, accepting it as just an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Now, why does this matter? Because if you can train yourself to stay composed when small failures happen, you're better equipped to handle bigger challenges down the line. It's like building muscle through small, consistent exercises. Each time you practice calmness, acceptance, or adaptability during these minor setbacks, you're strengthening the part of your brain that stays rational and steady during chaos. The Stoics also believed in reframing setbacks to see their positive potential. Let's go back to that coffee example. Could the spilled coffee remind you to double-check your grip next time? Or could it turn into an amusing story to share with friends later? Reframing doesn't mean pretending the inconvenience didn't happen. It simply shifts your focus from frustration to opportunity, even if that opportunity is as small as learning to laugh at yourself. Marcus Aurelius put it beautifully when he said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." In other words, the way we choose to interpret life's small failures is entirely within our control. Here's a simple, actionable tip for practicing Stoicism daily. Use a setback reflection moment. When you notice a small failure or annoyance, a traffic jam, a missed deadline, or even a snarky comment from someone, pause and ask yourself, is this within my control? If it's not, practice letting it go by taking a deep breath and mentally reminding yourself, I can only control my response. It is within your control. Reflect on what you can do differently next time without berating yourself for the mistake. This short, intentional pause can make a huge difference in how you approach life's little irritations. So next time you spill coffee, miss a train, or burn your toast, think of it as more than just an annoyance. It's a moment to practice Stoicism, to reframe, to reflect, and to grow. These daily failures might be small, but they're some of life's best opportunities to build patience, acceptance, and an unshakable calm that extends far beyond coffee stains. It's often said that the way you view failure determines your path forward. Modern psychology offers us the concept of the fixed vs. growth mindset, a framework developed by Carol Dweck. In a fixed mindset, failure is seen as proof of inherent limitations, something final and unchangeable. If you fail, it means you're simply not smart enough, talented enough, or capable enough. On the other hand, a growth mindset sees failure from an entirely different angle. It's not about who you are right now, but about who you could become. Failure becomes a stepping stone, a necessary part of the process to learn, improve, and grow. Interestingly, this idea of a growth mindset isn't new. It aligns deeply with Stoic philosophy. The Stoics embraced challenges and setbacks as essential opportunities for growth, much like the growth mindset encourages today. For both, the focus is on the process rather than the outcome, and on the belief that abilities and strengths are cultivated through effort, reflection, and adaptation rather than being fixed traits. Marcus Aurelius's famous line, "What stands in the way becomes the way," perfectly captures this belief. Each obstacle, every failure, is not a blockade to stop you but a path to strengthen you. Imagine encountering a significant professional setback, say, being passed over for a promotion at work. A fixed mindset might immediately interpret this as a signal to give up. I wasn't chosen because I'm not good enough, and there's nothing I can do to change that. It turns into a narrative of defeat, where failure defines your capabilities and future potential. But now, let's approach that same situation with a Stoic-inspired growth mindset. Instead of letting the failure stop you, you begin to ask, what can I take away from this? What areas can I improve? How can I turn this into a learning experience that prepares me for the next opportunity? The promotion wasn't an end, it was feedback that helps you refine your skills, re-strategize, and come back stronger. The Stoic approach also emphasizes that your worth is not tied to the outcome but to your effort and the values you display along the way. Epictetus taught that it's not external events like a job title or someone else's recognition that define you, it's how you choose to respond. Adopting a growth mindset doesn't mean denying the disappointment of failure. Instead, it's about reframing it, viewing it as essential feedback rather than a final judgment. This shift in thinking gives you a kind of freedom. You no longer fear failure as something to avoid at all costs. Instead, you accept it as a necessary part of the journey toward growth. So, how do you start building this combined Stoic and growth mindset in your own life? One practical step is to change how you talk to yourself about failures. When you encounter a setback, pay attention to your inner dialogue. Are you saying things like, "I'm terrible at this," or "This proves I'll never succeed," If so, pause and consciously reframe those thoughts. Replace them with questions like, "What did I learn from this? What can I do differently next time? How can I grow from this experience?" This reframing mirrors the Stoic practice of reflection, which was central to their resilience and self-improvement. Another step is to actively seek out challenges. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort, like enduring simple living or exposing themselves to difficult situations to build their character. Apply this idea by stepping outside your comfort zone. Tackle a project you're not entirely sure you can master, or pursue goals that seem just out of reach. Failure may naturally be part of the process, but each stumble sharpens your skills, builds your confidence, and strengthens your mindset. Ultimately, both Stoicism and the growth mindset teach us that failure isn't the end, it's the beginning of something greater. When we stop fearing failure and start embracing it, we unlock the mindset needed to grow, adapt, and thrive in every aspect of life. Failure is an inevitable part of life, but as we've explored today, the Stoics saw it not as a punishment or a reflection of inadequacy, but as one of life's most valuable teachers. Through their timeless wisdom, we've learned that failure is not something to fear or avoid. It's a force to embrace, a tool for growth, and a mirror reflecting where we can improve. By applying Stoic principles, we can transform setbacks into stepping stones and losses into lessons. Let's recap. The Stoics taught us to accept failure as part of the human condition. Epictetus reminded us to focus only on what we can control: our actions, our responses, and how we choose to interpret events. Marcus Aurelius encouraged us to see obstacles as opportunities for growth, reminding us that what stands in the way becomes the way. And Seneca showed us that difficulties, no matter how painful, strengthen the mind and prepare us for the challenges ahead. We've also explored practical ways to apply these ideas. By reframing failure as feedback, letting go of ego, and reflecting on what each setback teaches us, we can step forward with greater clarity and resilience. Whether it's journaling to uncover hidden lessons, practicing gratitude for the strength adversity builds, or adopting a growth mindset that views failure as a necessary part of progress, Stoicism arms us with tools to handle life's ups and downs with grace. And perhaps the most comforting reminder from the Stoics is the transient nature of failure. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how fleeting life's troubles truly are, writing, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. While failure may feel permanent in the moment, time continues to move forward. The lessons we take from failure shape us, but the failure itself is never the defining feature of our lives unless we let it be. So how might you approach your own failures through a Stoic lens? Take a moment to reflect. What setbacks have you faced recently? What lessons might they hold? How can you reframe them as part of your growth rather than a limitation? Use these questions to uncover value in experiences that, at first glance, may seem purely negative. The Stoics remind us that our power lies not in avoiding failure, but in how we choose to respond to it. As you think about your own journey, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever turned a failure into a meaningful lesson? How has a setback shaped you in ways you didn't expect? Share your experiences in the comments. We're all learning and growing together. And if you found this video valuable, consider subscribing for more insights into Stoic philosophy and how it can empower your everyday life. To close, I'll leave you with one final thought, a quote from Seneca. "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Failure is the friction that refines us, sharpens us, and prepares us for a brighter, stronger future. Let's embrace it, learn from it, and continue moving forward toward the best versions of